that jaywalking punk anarchist. Jaywalking punk anarchist.
Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer taking a look at panhandling and digital currency. I used to carry cash with me at all times. Buses only took cash, and since I had a burner phone, smartphones hadn't quite taken off just yet, it was easy to get cash back for the bus every time I bought minutes for my phone. Consequently, this was also the time in which I would give and could give buskers and panhandlers money. Since this time in my life, I began seeing the need for paper and coin currency disappear. I have not regularly carried cash for years. There are services which replace paper currency like Venmo or PayPal, and many newer services just automatically use card, no cash for your Uber driver, for example. And many older systems are transitioning to card. Buses take bus cards, vending machines, parking meters, and laundry machines take cards. In fact, my last apartment, the laundry room took cards, and my current apartment doesn't. And the sudden need to have coins for laundry is wildly more inconvenient now than it would have been for me in the past. But I suppose that's another story. Last time I went busking on a road trip about a year or two ago, I barely got enough money for parking, let alone food. Is it because of the death of physical currency, or because I'm incredibly untalented and my music offends the general public sensibilities? We may never know. An article on CNBC.com states, paper money might be losing its appeal. In a survey of more than 2,000 Americans, U.S. Bank found that people aren't carrying a lot of cash with them, and when they do, they aren't spending much. Overall, 50% of respondents said they carry cash with them less than half of the time they are out. A recent article by the New York Post looks at a different study and states, more than a quarter of all 2,000 polled, 29%, rarely or never have cash on them. And according to the data and respondents estimated that cash is used in fewer than a quarter, 24%, of all purchases they make each week. The article goes on to argue, with the ever-growing prominence of card and digital spending, it's perhaps no surprise that 61% of Americans studied think there's a very real possibility that cash will one day disappear altogether. And in an article by the Washington Post, it states, a recent survey by Ipsos found that 38% of U.S. respondents would ditch cash completely if they could, while 34% report that they already rarely carry it. And this really isn't even about physical currency disappearing altogether. It doesn't need to. The process has basically already begun. Now, apparently in some states with legal marijuana, you have to use physical currency, something to do with banks and involvement with federal law, but I don't expect that to last, and if anything, this is the exception that proves the rule. Okay, so all this being said, here is actually my big question. With the disappearance of paper currency, when will it become socially acceptable to panhandle with your PayPal? There is a stigma around so-called frivolous decadencies and poverty.
If you're on welfare, you shouldn't have tattoos.
For example. But the big one here is,
why are you begging for money if you have a smartphone?
In fact, a simple YouTube search for so-called fake homeless pulls up pages of videos, many with millions of views. Now, there are many reasons that these arguments are grossly ignorant and offensive, but the cell phone one is particularly damning. A typical smartphone-wielding person relies on their phone for many day-to-day things. Receiving phone calls, knowing what time it is, checking emails, ordering various transportation and delivery services, using GPS, checking a store's location or hours of operation, keeping track of your schedule, checking the news, social media, etc., etc., etc. And guess what? Homeless persons need these services as well, particularly persons who don't have easy access to a laptop or desktop computer and a home Wi-Fi. And with new models of phones coming out all the time, previous models are increasingly available and affordable. I'd worked for a homeless shelter for a few years, and most of those folks had cell phones, many of them smartphones. And believe me, it wasn't because it was a decadent self-indulgence. They had phones for the same reasons I stated earlier, the reasons we all have them. Family members and friends want to know that they're safe and able to access shelter. Current or prospective employers expect to be able to contact them. They need to keep track of locations and hours of various services, public transportation, food banks, government programs and shelters, etc., etc. According to an article in The Guardian, while society may view a homeless person's ownership of a smartphone as an unnecessary extravagance, In reality, experts say this demographic is one of the most dependent on the technology as a resource for stability. In addition to being an essential way to keep in touch with support services, caseworkers, and to look for jobs or housing, a mobile phone can also serve as an escape from isolation. All this said, I really don't think, unfortunately, that the general public would, at this time, accept paying panhandlers via smartphone, whether with a cell phone card swiper or PayPal or Venmo or whatever, particularly when panhandling encounters are based so much on appearance. As the Washington Post article mentioned earlier states, it's hard to imagine some veterans of Washington streets adjusting to such a system, which would require a bank account and a Square credit card processor, not to mention time, internet access, and technological savvy. Chase is 60 years old and has panhandled with a plastic cup for years. He had never heard of Square. As for Sullivan, the whaleman wouldn't deploy his smartphone in the course of panhandling. If you got a phone, people think, how can a homeless person have that, he says. They think differently of you. The article goes on to argue, in Seattle, entrepreneur Jonathan Kumar has developed an app called Samaritan, which equips homeless individuals with Bluetooth-enabled beacons. When someone passes a beacon holder, they can donate via the app. Beacon holders can then use the funds to purchase goods from participating local merchants. Now, I've personally asked around, and one person said they'd panhandled with their PayPal outside of a coffee shop and using the shop's Wi-Fi with some success, but that's certainly an outlier. It's unsure what the future will look like for panhandlers and buskers in an increasingly cash-light society. With automation, crippling debts, skyrocketing rents, stagnant wages, the war on drugs, prohibitively expensive medical needs, capital flight, and class warfare forcing more and more people onto the streets, I certainly hope that the general public can, without stigma, accept electronic donations for panhandling and busking situations, as easily as they have accepted cashless solutions for other transactions. If you're interested in radical theory, looking for a book recommendation or whatever, you can get your radical reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.
Well, these assholes never stop trying to keep me down. But then I meet some homeless people who share dreams of leaving this town. And these cops never stop trying to get me to leave. But that's alright, because everyone knows musicians are cooler than the police.
Practically totally unrelated, but I reviewed a book a while back called Surviving on the Streets, How to Go Down Without Going Out, which is kind of a how to survive homelessness guide. I didn't have my current microphone at the time, so the sound quality is terrible, but aside from that, it's pretty cool. Anyways, bye.